Welcome back, friends. If you've ever been fascinated by the forgotten secrets of ancient warfare, you're in for something truly extraordinary today. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy history brought to life with vivid detail and storytelling. Your support helps us keep these incredible stories alive for generations to come. Now, let me ask you this. How could a small piece of metal, no bigger than your forearm, help build the largest empire the world has ever known? It didn't just win battles. It shaped the fate of nations, crushed entire armies, and instilled terror in the hearts of those who dared to face Rome. We're talking about a weapon so simple, yet so devastating, that it remained a military secret for centuries. Its name, the Plumbata, a lead-weighted dart that turned ordinary soldiers into precision-striking machines of war. In the next few minutes, we'll uncover how this humble invention changed history, influenced strategy, and created a psychological advantage that helped Rome dominate the ancient world. Buckle up. This isn't just history. It's a lesson in power. In the grand story of ancient Rome, we often picture legions of armored soldiers, marching in perfect formation, shields raised, short swords drawn ready to conquer the world. But what if I told you that one of Rome's most powerful military tools wasn't a sword or a siege engine, but a dart, a lead-weighted throwing dart, no longer than a foot, called the Plumbata? Small, silent, and deadly. This weapon was so effective that it helped secure Rome's military dominance for centuries, yet barely anyone today remembers its name. The word Plumbata comes from plumbum, the Latin word for lead. Its design was deceptively simple, a wooden shaft about 12 inches long, tipped with an iron head, and weighted with a round or pear-shaped mass of lead at the center. On the surface, it resembled a larger, heavier version of a lawn dart. But make no mistake, this was not a child's toy. It was a highly engineered piece of battlefield technology that brought fear and devastation from a distance, long before the enemy ever saw a Roman sword. What made the Plumbata so revolutionary wasn't just its lethality, it was its symbolism. It embodied everything that made the Roman military machine: great discipline, ingenuity, adaptability, and economy of force. The Plumbata could be mass-produced cheaply, carried easily, and thrown by any trained soldier with deadly effect. While many ancient armies relied solely on brute strength and flashy displays, Rome refined its warfare like a craftsman sharpens a chisel, focused, efficient, and unforgiving. Each legionary typically carried 5 of these darts, clipped to the inside of their shield. That meant before the battle even began, a Roman soldier had the power to rain down precision strikes from a safe distance, softening enemy lines, breaking morale, and gaining an upper hand all before lifting a sword. It was a simple weapon with a complex purpose to turn a single man into a tactical advantage. Perhaps most impressive of all was the Plumbata's accessibility. It didn't require elite training or exotic materials. A soldier in the field could repair or even craft one using basic supplies: wood, iron, and melted lead. That made it not just deadly, but practical, especially during long campaigns across foreign lands. But over time, the Plumbata would fade from memory. Like many brilliant inventions lost in the shifting sands of history, its story was buried until now. So today, as we uncover the secrets behind this forgotten weapon, we're not just talking about a piece of metal. We're rediscovering a symbol of Roman strategy, craftsmanship, and battlefield dominance. And perhaps, we're also learning something timeless. True power doesn't always come from size or noise. It comes from precision, discipline, and knowing how to strike before your enemy even sees you coming. Now imagine this. You're standing on a battlefield, shield in hand, heart pounding, as the Roman legions form their ranks across the field. You're expecting swords, maybe heavy spears, but instead, a sudden hiss fills the air. Before you can react, a wave of iron-tipped darts streaks down from the sky, whistling as they fall. You hear the thud of impact. Men cry out, shields split, and before the fighting even begins, your formation is already breaking apart. That, in essence, is the terror and brilliance of the Plumbata, Rome's overlooked throwing weapon that struck fear long before the swords came out. What made this weapon so effective wasn't its size or appearance, it was the sheer efficiency of how it was used. Each dart was about 12 inches long, with an iron tip at one end and a lead weight in the middle, allowing it to spin and stabilize in flight, similar to the way a modern football spirals through the air. This spin gave the Plumbata both range and piercing power, capable of hitting enemies over 260 feet, nearly 90 yards away. That's close to the length of an American football field, unlike heavy Roman spears like the pilum, which were usually thrown once and discarded. The Plumbata was light enough to carry in multiples. Soldiers typically stored 5 darts on the inside of their shields, using leather loops or brackets easily accessible and quick to deploy. This allowed for a rapid volley of projectiles at the beginning of battle, softening the enemy lines and creating chaos before the Romans even moved forward. And it wasn't just infantry that used them. Cavalry units deployed Plumbatae with devastating effect while on the move. From horseback, a soldier could throw one of these weighted darts with surprising accuracy, especially against enemies who thought they were out of reach. What gave the Plumbata an edge over traditional weapons was its balance of mobility, accuracy, and stopping power. While archers required large bows, arrows, and open space to be effective, and spearmen needed to close the distance, the Plumbata allowed Roman soldiers to strike first quietly and brutally from a distance. Perhaps even more incredible was its penetrating force. Because of the lead core and aerodynamic spin, these darts could pierce chainmail, padded armor, and even the weak points of plate defenses. Some historical accounts describe enemy soldiers collapsing mid-charge after being struck through the thigh, neck, or shoulder by a dart they never saw coming. And yet it wasn't a weapon reserved for elite troops. That was its genius. Any well-trained legionary could wield it with deadly precision. The Romans didn't just invent clever tools. They trained their entire army to use them well. That's why Plumbata wasn't just a weapon, it was a strategic force multiplier, helping Rome win battles before they truly began. Some weapons don't just wound the body, they attack the mind. And the Plumbata was one of the most terrifying psychological tools the Roman army ever wielded. Imagine you're a tribal warrior from the forests of Germania. You've faced danger before. You know the sound of battle, the clang of swords, the shout of war cries. But as you march toward the Roman lines, something unexpected happens. The air begins to sing. A high-pitched whistling, sharp and unnatural, cuts through the wind. Then comes the thud flesh, bone, armor followed by chaos. You don't know where it came from. You can't even see who threw it. All you know is that the man beside you just dropped to the ground, clutching a dart embedded deep in his shoulder. That's what made the Plumbata so powerful. It didn't just injure it unsettled. The Romans didn't rely solely on brute strength. They understood something that modern militaries still study today: control the fear. And you control the fight. Each Plumbata was designed with not only flight and impact in mind, but sound. The small, shallow grooves carved into its wooden shaft weren't just there for decoration. As the dart spun through the air, stabilized by its lead core, it emitted a shrill, whistling noise. It was deliberate. Roman engineers wanted the weapon to announce itself with a ghostly cry just before impact. It was a psychological drumbeat, a warning that death was in the air. Enemy armies weren't prepared for this kind of warfare. Many relied on courage, ritual, and face-to-face confrontation. The idea of being cut down from the sky by something they couldn't see or stop was deeply demoralizing. Some even believed the Romans had cursed weapons, or were aided by gods. One captured enemy commander once described it by saying, "We fight men, but what comes from the sky are demons." The Plumbata's psychological edge wasn't just incidental, it was intentional. Roman military handbooks trained officers to watch for signs of panic and hesitation in enemy ranks following a volley of darts. If the front lines began to falter, shoulders sagging, shields lowering, it was the perfect time to strike. Roman commanders were taught to order a charge the moment morale cracked. The fear spread fast. Once a unit broke under the strain of a rain of darts, it often didn't recover. And this tactic worked even when the Romans were outnumbered. With a few dozen Plumbatae and the element of terror, they could level the playing field. It wasn't just about killing, it was about breaking the will to fight. That's what made the Plumbata so unique. It reached into the mind, planted fear, and made enemies question if they even wanted to keep going. And in battle, hesitation kills. The Plumbata wasn't just a piece of iron and lead. It was a messenger of dread, a psychological masterstroke, and one of Rome's most devastating invisible weapons. In every great army, there's an elite, the chosen few. In ancient Rome, among the legions of disciplined soldiers, there existed a specialized unit whose skill turned a simple dart into a battlefield game-changer, the Martio Barbulis. Their name, roughly translating to the barbed sons of Mars, a nod to the Roman god of war, was no accident. These weren't your average foot soldiers. These were masters of the Plumbata, hand-picked for their precision, coordination, and deadly aim. While every Roman legionary was trained to use the Plumbata, the Martio Barbulis elevated it to an art form. Each man in this unit carried 5 weighted darts, securely fastened inside the shield, ready to be launched in rapid succession. But it wasn't just about carrying more, it was about using them with surgical efficiency. These soldiers could throw while advancing, while kneeling, even while flanking, all without compromising formation or defense. It was warfare in motion. And when dozens of them launched their darts simultaneously, the sky darkened with deadly precision. Their training was notoriously brutal. New recruits didn't just practice strength, they trained their reflexes, coordination, and spatial awareness. In fact, Roman historians have noted that musical ability was sometimes used as a surprising recruitment filter. Well, because rhythm and timing mattered. Soldiers who could master the tempo of music could master the timing of coordinated dart volleys, where hitting the same zone at the same time could decide the outcome of a battle. And it worked. Records describe how formations of Martio Barbulis turned the tide of massive engagements before swords ever clashed. In the famous Battle of Argentoratum, modern-day Strasbourg, in 327 AD, these elite troops were positioned on raised ground. As waves of Germanic warriors rushed toward the Roman center, the Martio Barbulis unleashed a synchronized storm of Plumbatae. The front lines of the enemy collapsed in confusion, giving the Roman heavy infantry the opening they needed to counterattack and win. But their value didn't stop at the battlefield's edge. The Martio Barbulis were given special status within the legion's extra pay, better food, and exemption from camp construction duties, a coveted perk. They were also frequently attached to imperial guards, and dispatched with generals on high-risk campaigns. Proof of their strategic importance. Archaeological findings back this up. A Roman villa discovered near ancient Aquincum, modern-day Budapest, revealed bronze insignias marked Prima Martio Barbulis, the first unit of its kind. These weren't just foot soldiers. These were Rome's precision strike teams, decades if not centuries ahead of their time. When most people think of elite Roman units, they think of Praetorian guards. But make no mistake, the Martio Barbulis were equally lethal, if not more so because they killed before the enemy ever got close. They were quiet, efficient, deadly, and they proved that in Rome's hands, even the humblest weapon could become a tool of empire. When we think of powerful ancient weapons, we often imagine massive war machines, catapults, ballistae, battering rams. But Rome understood something deeper. A weapon didn't need to be large to be lethal. It just needed to be smart. The Plumbata was the perfect example of this principle in action. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't complicated, but it was devastatingly effective, and its genius lay in the way it was designed and produced. Each Plumbata was roughly 12 inches long, about the length of a forearm, with a sharpened iron tip on the front and a lead weight usually shaped like a ball or teardrop molded around the shaft near the center. The main body was made from lightweight, durable wood, often pine or ash, shaped to allow for aerodynamic flight. Fletching at the rear, typically made from leather or feathers, helped stabilize the dart mid-air. But the real breakthrough was the weight distribution. That central chunk of lead didn't just add power, it transformed the dart into a rotating projectile, like a spinning top or a modern rifle bullet. When thrown correctly, the Plumbata would spiral through the air, increasing both its accuracy and its penetrating force. This spiral motion, combined with its compact size, allowed it to pierce through chainmail, padded armor, and even weak points in plate protection. Unlike heavier weapons that required strength and distance to be effective, the Plumbata only needed a well-trained arm and a clear line of sight. A soldier didn't need to be a giant, he needed to be precise. Another stroke of Roman brilliance was the weapon's ease of production. Soldiers didn't need a massive forge or advanced tools to make one. With just a block of hardwood, some molded lead, and an iron point, they could craft or repair a Plumbata in the field. This made it not only deadly, but practical and scalable, perfect for long campaigns far from supply centers. Archaeological discoveries across Europe have unearthed molds used to shape the lead weights, as well as toolkits specifically designed for maintaining Plumbatae. A recent dig in what is now Romania even revealed over 200 intact darts, along with crafting tools, suggesting that certain Roman outposts served as on-site production hubs. Because of its simplicity, legions could be armed quickly and cheaply without sacrificing performance. That's a rare combination in any era of warfare. Think about that for a moment, a weapon that was easy to make, light to carry, deadly in the hands of average soldiers, and adaptable to different terrains and enemies. That's not just smart, it's military genius. The Plumbata didn't need to be gold-plated or ceremonial. It was a workhorse weapon, a quiet killer. And it proved that brilliance in war often comes not from grandeur, but from simplicity perfected. It's strange, isn't it? How something so effective, so deadly, and so cleverly designed could vanish from history with barely a trace. The Plumbata, once a cornerstone of Roman battlefield dominance, eventually slipped into obscurity, not because it stopped working, but because the world around it changed. Its decline wasn't sudden. It happened quietly, over decades, maybe centuries, as the Western Roman Empire began to crumble in the 5th century AD. With the empire fractured and borders constantly under siege, The vast military infrastructure that once trained soldiers, forged weapons, and standardized equipment began to fall apart. The system that had made the Plumbata so widespread mass production, coordinated training, tactical doctrine simply couldn't survive the chaos. And then there was the matter of resources. The Plumbata depended on access to high-quality lead and iron, materials that became harder to acquire as trade routes deteriorated and imperial mines were seized by invading forces. What was once a cheap, field-ready weapon became increasingly difficult to produce. In fact, some surviving Roman records lament the decline in quality darts becoming too light. Iron tips brittle and weights uneven. A good soldier can only do so much with a poorly made tool. As the Roman military broke down, so too did the knowledge behind the Plumbata. The training schools that had once taught precise throwing techniques shut their doors. Veteran soldiers, once mentors for younger recruits, were killed, scattered, or absorbed into barbarian forces. And unlike swords or shields, which remained visible and iconic, the Plumbata had always been a hidden weapon, strapped to the inside of a shield, launched before the real fighting began. It was never meant to be glamorous, and that's perhaps why it was forgotten so easily. But the loss wasn't just tactical. It was also symbolic. The Plumbata represented a Roman way of war discipline over chaos, precision over brute strength, preparation over luck. As post-Roman kingdoms emerged in the early medieval period, warfare shifted. The rise of heavily armored knights, elite cavalry, and feudal levies changed the dynamics of the battlefield. Tactics that relied on organized formations and psychological warfare fell out of favor. Training was no longer standardized. It was informal, based on local tradition, not imperial doctrine. Interestingly, there are hints that the Eastern Roman Empire Byzantium held on to the weapon longer. In the 6th century military manual Strategicon, attributed to Emperor Maurice, references are made to dart-like weapons used in tactical formations. But by then, even that knowledge was fading into legend. And so, the Plumbata, a weapon that had once helped shape empires, became little more than a footnote in forgotten manuscripts. No grand ceremony marked its end. No chronicler mourned its loss. But its disappearance teaches us something profound. Even the most effective technologies can vanish when the systems that support them collapse. Power, in the end, doesn't just come from invention. It depends on structure, knowledge, and continuity. And when those fall away, even the sharpest dart can be dulled by time. Though the Plumbata vanished from active use long ago, its legacy never truly died. Like a whisper echoing through the corridors of history, traces of this humble yet powerful weapon continued to shape the way future generations thought about warfare, even if they didn't realize it. Across the ruins of former Roman outposts, archaeologists have uncovered caches of Plumbatae tucked away in ancient armories, forts, and supply depots. Some were still intact, lead weights perfectly cast, iron tips still sharp to the touch. These weren't just relics, they were the fingerprints of a forgotten doctrine, one that emphasized precision, discipline, and psychological advantage over brute force. In fact, even medieval military orders, those who fought during the Crusades, may have drawn inspiration from Roman tactics. A few surviving manuscripts from the Knights Hospitaller and other monastic orders mention heavy darts used in castle defense. While not identical to the Roman design, these weapons bear a striking resemblance in function. It's possible that fragments of Roman military manuals, preserved in Byzantine texts, filtered back into Europe and planted the seeds of reinvention centuries later. But the Plumbata's legacy wasn't just tactical, it was cultural. Roman poets and writers used the imagery of rains of darts to describe overwhelming force, emotional anguish, or fate itself. These metaphors outlived the weapon, appearing in plays, religious texts, and even later literature across medieval Europe. To the Romans, the Plumbata had become more than a dart. It was a symbol of a silent, unseen force that could strike before the enemy ever had a chance to react. This metaphorical weight carried through generations. For scholars and military historians today, the Plumbata offers a powerful case study in how simple tools, when paired with training and strategy, can have outsized impact. It teaches us that innovation doesn't always look like grand machines or towering weapons. Sometimes, it's a quiet refinement, a perfectly weighted dart, thrown at the perfect moment that changes the outcome of history. In a way, the Plumbata's story mirrors the story of Rome itself. Both rose through discipline, adaptability, and strategic vision. Both left their mark not through brute spectacle, but through systematic excellence, and both, eventually, faded, leaving behind lessons for those wise enough to look. Today, as modern archaeologists, engineers, and military thinkers rediscover and study this forgotten weapon, the Plumbata is enjoying a kind of second life. It serves as a reminder that even the smallest tools can carry the greatest lessons, especially when they are wielded with intention, practice, and purpose. So while the Plumbata may no longer fly across ancient skies, its legacy still reaches us quietly, like a whisper from the past, reminding us that true power often begins with quiet genius. As we reach the end of the Plumbata's story, one thing becomes clear: this wasn't just a weapon. It was a philosophy, a symbol of how Rome thought, fought, and conquered. In today's world, we often equate strength with size or power with volume, but the Romans saw it differently. They understood that the most effective tools didn't need to be loud or massive. They needed to be refined, repeatable, and reliable. The Plumbata was all of these things. It reminds us that history isn't always shaped by the obvious. Rome didn't dominate the known world for centuries because it had the biggest weapons. It succeeded because it knew how to use simple tools better than anyone else. The Plumbata represents that exact idea. A dart no bigger than a foot in length, thrown by hand, yet capable of turning the tide of battles. It wasn't magic. It was training, discipline, execution. That's what made Rome powerful, and it's what makes the Plumbata meaningful even now. In a broader sense, the Plumbata is a case study in strategic integration. It wasn't just invented and handed out. It was integrated into the Roman military system. Soldiers were trained rigorously. Tactics were developed around its use. Specialized units like the Martio Barbulis were created to maximize its effectiveness. Rome didn't just build tools. They built systems that made tools matter. And when those systems fell apart, the tools, no matter how clever, disappeared with them. That's one of the most powerful lessons we can take from the Plumbata. Great ideas are only as strong as the structure supporting them. When that structure fades, when training declines, when supply chains break, when institutional memory is lost, then even the most brilliant innovations are forgotten. In today's world, whether in business, leadership, national defense, or daily life, that lesson still holds. Tools and technologies come and go, but discipline, adaptability, and clarity of purpose, those are timeless. Even more striking is how the Plumbata illustrates the psychological edge of strategy. Rome knew that fear could win a fight just as surely as a sword. The sound of a Plumbata slicing through the air, its eerie whistle, was as valuable as its iron tip. It shook morale, disrupted formations, and bought the Romans just enough time to strike first. Preparation, precision, and timing. Those were Rome's real weapons. The Plumbata was just the delivery system. So, as we reflect on this small but mighty invention, we're reminded of a larger truth. Sometimes it's not the tool that changes history, but the mindset behind it. And maybe, just maybe, the next time we face a challenge, we'll remember the legacy of a simple dart and the empire it helped build, not because it was loud or flashy, but because it was exactly what was needed, exactly when it was needed most. The story of the Plumbata teaches us something far deeper than military history. It reminds us that true strength doesn't always come from size or noise, but from precision, preparation, and purpose. Just like Rome's humble dart, the tools that shape our lives, discipline, focus, timing, are often invisible to others, but powerful when used with intention. In a world that often rewards flash over substance, the Plumbata reminds us to invest in what truly matters. Practice, resilience, and smart strategy. You don't need to be the loudest in the room to be the most effective. You just need to know when and how to act. So if you found inspiration in this forgotten piece of ancient genius, consider what quiet tools in your own life might be waiting to make their impact. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through history and meaning, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into the lessons the past still holds for us today. Because history isn't just about what was, it's about what still matters.